Hi, this is Jennifer from Read It Again. Please join me while I read The Lighthouse Family, The Storm by Cynthia Rylant, chapters 1 through 3. Please consider subscribing, and if you enjoy this book, hit the like button. The Lighthouse Family, The Storm by Cynthia Rylant, illustrated by Preston McDaniels, chapters 1 through 3. In a lonely lighthouse far from city and town, far from the comfort of friends, lived a kind-hearted cat named Pandora. She had been living at this lighthouse all alone for 4 long years, and it was beginning to wear. She found herself sighing long, deep, lonely sighs. She sat on the rocks overlooking the waves far too long. Sometimes her nose got a sunburn. And at night, when she tried to read by the lantern light, her mind wandered, and she would think for hours on her childhood when she had friends and company. Why did Pandora accept this lonely lighthouse life? Because a lighthouse had once saved her. When Pandora was but a kitten, she and her father had gone sailing aboard a grand schooner, bound for a new country. Pandora's mother had stayed behind with the baby to join them later. And when they were at sea, Pandora and her father were shaken from their beds one night by an awful twisting of the ship's great bow. "Stay here, Pandora," her father had commanded. "Stay here and wait until I come for you." They were in a terrible storm. The wind was howling and the waves crashed hard upon them. Worse, a deep fog had spread itself all over the water, and it is fog that will bring a ship to its end. Fog that will blind a sailor's eyes until his ship has hit the jagged shore and torn itself to pieces. Pandora's father knew this as he strained with the others to keep the ship's sails aloft, and his daughter trembled in her bed. He knew what somber danger they were in. But Pandora's father was a brave cat, and he would not give up hope. He would hold tight to the riggings with the others until help, in whatever form, might come to them. In time, the winds began to settle and the waves grew smaller, but the dense fog refused to lift. The ship's captain was clearly worried, for he knew these waters they sailed in. He knew the long history of ships gone down. And he carried little hope that they might come to them, that someone might lead them away from the deadly shore. For only a lighthouse might show them the way, and there had been no working light on these waters for 100 years. So it was with much bewilderment and amazement and overwhelming joy that he heard first the deep, clear sound of a foghorn, then saw before him a light. Yes, a light. And it was not the light of another ship or small boat. Only a very powerful lamp could make itself seen through a fog like this. Only the lamp of a lighthouse. "Pull leeward," cried the captain. "Away from the light." And everyone pulled hard on the riggings to make the ship turn away from the dangerous shore. The ship and everyone on it was saved. Ever after, Pandora dreamed of lighthouses. Though she had not seen the beacon that had saved her, her father had, and he spoke of it often. He always wondered who had made the great light shine. As she grew, Pandora herself came to think much on this. She went to the library and gathered books on lighthouses. She drew them in her sketch pad. She dreamed of them at night. Then one morning she awoke, and she knew what she must do. She must become a lighthouse keeper. She knew that this was her destiny. It did not take Pandora long to find a lighthouse in need of keeping. It is a hard and lonely job, and few want it. Lighthouses are often built in unwelcoming places, atop sharp and dangerous rocks. A winter storm can hold a keeper inside for weeks on end. And when she finally emerges, there is no one to talk to. They are all someplace else, living in little towns or big cities. They are not interested in desolation. But Pandora was not afraid of this life, for her heart was so good and clear that fear would not creep inside it. The ships in those unpredictable waters carried fathers and mothers and children, and they needed guiding. She knew she could do it. And Pandora had been doing it faithfully for 4 long years. She had seen many an awful storm come and go. She had stayed awake long winter nights tending the great lamp, sounding the deep horn. Pandora did not know how many lives she had saved, but she knew that she had saved some. And now, weary with being alone for so long, Pandora was about to save one more. Chapter 2, Seabold. There are those who love the sea so deeply they cannot bear to be away from it, even for a day. A dog named Seabold was one of these. He was born to a sailor's life. When Seabold was old enough to leave home and family, he built himself a boat, which he named Adventure, said goodbye to his parents and sisters, and off he went in search of the life meant for him. He was a fine sailor. He had a keen understanding of the wind. He could read the stars, and he trusted his instincts. For 5 years, Seabold sailed the world's great oceans, and his instincts never failed him. He sailed safe and strong and free of worry. But one day, all this changed. Seabold had always known when a storm was coming. His nose told him so. And he had always found a sheltered cove or harbor in which to wait out the rough seas. But this day, he had a cold. He had a cold and a stuffy nose, and his sense of smell was very bad. Added to this, he was tired. Seabold took a long, long nap in his bunk, and he did not notice the seabirds nervously circling in the air above him, agitated and calling to one another about the bad weather ahead. The seabirds all wisely headed for land, but Seabold, adrift in his dreams, stayed out on the open water. Then the great storm hit. Seabold was jolted from sleep by a sharp crack of lightning, a deep roar of thunder, and an enormous crashing wave. As Adventure was flung here and there, up and down, Seabold clung to the little boat with all his strength, for there was nothing else he could do. The sea, which had always been his friend, had turned against him, and for the first time in his sailor's life, Seabold was afraid. He whispered into the wind, "Safe harbor! Let there be a safe harbor!" Just as Seabold whispered these words, a magnificent light broke through the darkness, and the long, distant call of a horn sounded across the water. "Safe harbor," Seabold repeated. And this was the last thing Seabold said before he was lifted and rolled over and over into the deep black sea. One might have thought the dog was forever lost, but this is not the end of Seabold's story. Chapter 3, Comfort. When Seabold next awoke, he wondered if perhaps the storm had been just a dream. For he found himself in a little wooden bed under a cheerful gingham quilt, and he was no longer in the sea, but looking out at the sea through a small window by his side. A daisy stood in a jar on the windowsill. Seabold tapped his head to be sure he wasn't dreaming, and just as he was about to try his legs on the shiny wooden floor, the door to his room opened, and in stepped a cat. She was smiling and had an apron tied around her waist. In her hands was a tray of tea and biscuits. "Good morning," she said, setting the tray on the table beside the bed. "I hoped you might be awake." "I am Pandora." Still unsure whether he was dreaming, Seabold extended his paw to shake hers. "And I am Seabold," he said. "At least, I think I am." Pandora smiled. You have had a rather bad journey, she said. I thought it was my last, answered Siebold. Pandora poured him a cup of tea, which smelled like flowers. Siebold drank it gratefully. Thank you, he said. May I have more? I'm so thirsty. Pandora nodded and poured another cup. All that salt water, she said. I don't know how I'm alive, said Siebold. Nor do I, said Pandora. When I found you on the shore 3 days ago, I was certain you were dead. I've been here 3 days? Exclaimed Siebold. Yes, Pandora smiled, sleeping like a baby. Siebold shook his head. I remember only going under, he said. My boat. Have you seen her? Not yet, said Pandora, but it may be farther down the shore. When you are able to walk, we shall go search. Able to walk? Said Siebold. Your leg, said Pandora. Siebold drew back the gingham quilt. With surprise, he saw that his left leg was bandaged and splinted, knee to foot. Heavens, he said. But there is no pain. Shouldn't I be suffering? Pandora smiled with pleasure. I am something of a doctor, I suppose, she said. I have studied plants and learned those that heal. I wrapped your leg in plantain leaves to relieve the swelling, and the splint will prevent further injury. Amazing, said Siebold. Pandora blushed with pride. And are you alone here? Asked Siebold, sipping his tea. Pandora had poured herself a cup. Yes, all alone, she said, although I do have friends who stop by this island once in a while. In a very long while, I should say. They are seasonal. Seasonal? Said Siebold. They migrate, said Pandora, so I see them only in spring and fall as they make their way north or south. There is Atoll, the gray whale. You know a whale personally? Asked Siebold. Oh, yes, said Pandora. Whales are very sociable once you break the ice. Ask them about their children and they'll go on forever. There is also Henry, the tern, she continued. He's usually so pressed for time he doesn't even land. He simply flutters above my head and asks after my health, my garden, and so forth. Then he's off. He flies 6,000 miles every year. Really? Said Siebold. Yes, said Pandora. He's quite fit. But you're alone nearly always? Asked Siebold. Nearly always, said Pandora. Siebold shook his head. I never thought I would meet someone else like me, he said. Like you? Asked Pandora. One who loves the solitary life, said Siebold. I am nearly always at sea, nearly always alone, like you. Pandora smiled and thought a moment. I am not sure I love the solitary life, she said finally. I simply live it. And why? Asked Siebold. To save lives, said Pandora, like yours. And she poured him another cup of tea.
That's annoying.
And I read this last. These are totally out of order.
Yeah,
Just FYI.
You have